When Amara Okafor imagined marriage, she imagined warmth. Not the dramatic kind people posted online, the fake perfection, the staged laughter, but the quiet, steady warmth of knowing someone was on your side. She believed marriage was teamwork, a place where love softened stress and exhaustion felt shared, not lonely. For a while she had that. Daniel Okafor had been her calm, her reassurance, the man who held her hand through pregnancy, who whispered encouragement during long nights when sleep refused to come. When their son Ethan arrived, tiny and perfect, Amara felt certain she had chosen right. They were newly married, new parents, and painfully tired. Their apartment in Lekki Phase 1 was not luxurious, but it was neat and filled with hope. The walls were still bare in some places. The curtains were temporary. The couch came with promises of replacement soon, but it was theirs. Life, however, did not pause for love. Daniel's job demanded long hours. Meetings stretched late into the evening. Emails followed him home. Amara tried to balance motherhood with remote work, convincing herself she could manage everything if she just tried harder. She didn't want to complain. She didn't want to be that wife. But exhaustion is honest, it doesn't respect pride. Ethan cried often. Not the dramatic kind of cry, just the restless whimper of a baby who wanted comfort at odd hours. Amara woke up multiple times a night, rocking him while staring at the ceiling, counting minutes instead of sheep. Some mornings she forgot to eat. Some afternoons, laundry stayed untouched. And one evening, after Ethan cried for nearly an hour while the rice burned on the stove, Amara sat on the kitchen floor and cried too, quietly, so Daniel wouldn't hear. It was Daniel who finally said it. "You need help," he told her gently one night, after watching her fall asleep sitting upright with Ethan in her arms. Amara shook her head immediately. "I'm fine." Daniel smiled softly. "You're strong, not invincible." That was how they agreed to hire a maid. Someone to help with cleaning, cooking, watching Ethan during the day so Amara could breathe. They found her through a church recommendation. Her name was Grace. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, carrying a small box and a neatly folded bag. She wasn't flashy. No loud makeup. No exaggerated smiles. Just calm eyes and a quiet presence. Amara liked her instantly. Grace spoke politely, moved efficiently, and listened more than she talked. She took instructions seriously, asked thoughtful questions, and treated Ethan with a tenderness that surprised Amara. The baby stopped crying so much. Grace hummed soft songs while bathing him, old tunes, the kind Amara couldn't place but felt strangely comforting. She rocked him patiently, never rushing, never irritated. "She's good," Amara told Daniel that night. Daniel nodded, distracted. "Yes, very good." But something about the way he said it felt off. Amara ignored the feeling. Marriage had taught her that suspicion, once invited in, never left quietly. Days passed. Grace settled into the home seamlessly, like someone who already knew the rhythm of the place. She woke early, worked quietly, and disappeared into the background when needed. But sometimes small moments made Amara pause. Grace never called Daniel sir the way most house helps did. She avoided his eyes more than necessary. And once, while passing him in the hallway, she froze briefly, as if startled by a memory. Daniel noticed too. He became quieter. He stayed longer in the office. He avoided common areas when Grace was around. When Amara asked if he was stressed, he blamed work. But guilt has a presence. It changes the air in a room. The first undeniable crack came one Saturday morning. Amara was still asleep when she heard Daniel's footsteps in the living room. Moments later, silence fell, heavy, unnatural. She stepped out of the bedroom. Daniel stood frozen near the couch. Grace was kneeling on the rug, arranging Ethan's toys. She looked up slowly. Their eyes met. Time hesitated. "D," Grace whispered, the name slipping out before she could stop it. Daniel's face drained of color. "What did you say?" he asked sharply. Grace blinked, her composure shattering for just a second. I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else." Amara laughed lightly, trying to soften the moment. "Ah, Grace, you scared us. Who is D? Grace forced a smile. Just someone from my past. Daniel said nothing, but his hands were shaking. That night, Amara lay beside her husband, staring into the dark. Are you okay? She asked gently. Yes, Daniel replied too quickly. She turned toward him. You've been distant. He sighed. It's just work. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that some stories don't end. They wait. And Grace, sleeping in the small room at the back of the house, stared at the ceiling, holding memories she never planned to revisit. Not in this house. Not with this man. Not as the help. Silence is not always quiet. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it presses against your chest until breathing feels deliberate. That was how the Okafor home began to feel. Amara noticed it first in small ways. Daniel stopped lingering in shared spaces. He ate quickly, excused himself often, and suddenly preferred his phone to conversation. When Grace entered a room, he either left immediately or grew unnaturally stiff, like a man bracing for impact. Grace changed too. She became more withdrawn, less confident. She completed her work efficiently but avoided unnecessary movement around Daniel. If she heard his footsteps, she stepped aside. If he spoke, she answered briefly, eyes lowered. Two people orbiting each other carefully. Amara stood at the center, pretending nothing was wrong. One afternoon, Amara worked from her laptop while Grace fed Ethan in the dining area. The baby laughed loudly, his tiny hands clapping as Grace made funny faces at him. You have a gift, Amara said, smiling. He really loves you. Grace smiled faintly. Children are honest, she replied. They don't care who you are, only how you treat them. Something about her tone lingered. Amara closed her laptop. You don't talk much about yourself. Grace hesitated. There isn't much to say. You're young. You must have dreams. Grace looked away. I did. Amara studied her more closely. Grace wasn't uneducated. Her English was polished. Her mannerisms refined. This wasn't someone who had grown up only doing housework. You went to school? Amara asked. Yes, Grace replied. But life happened. Amara nodded. Life always did. She didn't know then that Grace had once imagined a life very different from this one. That she had once believed love could rewrite destiny. That evening, Daniel came home later than usual. He walked into the kitchen to find Grace washing dishes. He froze again, too visibly this time. Madam isn't around? He asked stiffly. She stepped out to make a call, Grace replied quietly. Silence filled the space. Daniel cleared his throat. You didn't have to stay so late. Grace didn't look up. I wanted to finish my work. You could have waited. She finally turned to him then. Her eyes were tired, but steady. You waited too, she said softly. 5 years. Daniel swallowed. Grace, please. Please what? She asked. Please don't remind you? Please pretend I never existed. His voice dropped. This isn't fair. She laughed bitterly. Neither was forgetting me. The sound of the front door opening made them both stiffen. Grace stepped back immediately. Daniel retreated like a man escaping fire. Amara walked in, smiling. I'm back. Neither replied. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside her, facing the wall, breathing shallowly. She turned toward him. Did something happen today? She asked. No. You're lying. Daniel sighed deeply. Amara, please. I'm tired. So am I, she replied quietly. But we still talk. He didn't respond. Amara stared into the darkness, her mind racing. Marriage had taught her that silence was rarely about peace. It was about avoidance. And avoidance always protected something. Or someone. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Grace began requesting time off she never needed before. Daniel stayed out even later. And Amara began noticing things she couldn't unsee. The way Grace flinched when Daniel said her name. The way Daniel corrected himself when he almost called her something else. The way neither of them ever stood too close, but never too far either. Then came the name. Amara heard it by accident. Grace was on the phone late at night, whispering urgently. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear. If I had known." Pause. "Yes, Daniel. Same Daniel." Amara's heart skipped. She stepped back quietly. "Daniel." Grace knew his name before she entered this house. The tension finally broke on a rainy Thursday evening. Amara returned early from the store after forgetting her wallet. As she stepped into the house, voices drifted from the kitchen. Grace was crying. "You left me with nothing," she said, her voice shaking. "I sold everything. I believed in you." Daniel's voice followed, strained, panicked. "Lower your voice." "Why?" Grace snapped. "So your wife won't hear?" Amara stopped cold. 5 years, Daniel," Grace continued. "I paid for your dream. And when you came back, you looked at me like a stranger." "I didn't recognize you," Daniel said weakly. Grace laughed through tears. "That hurt more than the betrayal." Amara walked into the kitchen. Both of them froze. "What are you talking about?" Amara asked calmly. The rain outside intensified. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Grace wiped her face and turned to Amara. "I didn't plan this," she said softly. "I didn't even know it was him when I took the job." Amara folded her arms slowly. "Start from the beginning." Grace inhaled deeply and began to tell the story that would change everything. Grace's hands trembled as she spoke, not because she was afraid, but because once some truths are spoken, they can never be taken back. Amara sat down slowly, her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if they could hear it. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the floor like a man awaiting judgment. 5 years ago," Grace began. "Daniel was not the man you married." Daniel flinched. "He was brilliant," she continued, her voice steadier now, "but lost, struggling, angry at the world for not rewarding his intelligence fast enough." Amara's chest tightened. Grace looked down at her hands. "We met at a small cyber cafe in Yaba. He was applying for scholarships, UK schools. Big dreams. No money." Daniel swallowed hard. "He talked about education like it was his escape route," Grace said. "Like once he crossed that border, everything would make sense." She paused. "And I believed him." Grace described their early days, the late-night conversations, shared meals, the hope that comes when two people believe they are building something together. "I wasn't rich," she said quietly, "but I was determined." She worked as a shop assistant during the day, cleaned offices at night, sold her phone, her jewelry, even her small sewing machine. "Every naira I saved," Grace said, "went into his dream." Amara's hands curled into fists. Daniel had told her he struggled alone. That was the first lie. "When he finally got admission," Grace continued, "he cried." Daniel's shoulders shook. "He held me and said, 'This is for us.'" She laughed bitterly. "I believed him." The room felt heavy with ghosts. Grace wiped her face. "I paid for his flight, his accommodation deposit, his feeding for the first few months." Daniel finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Grace, I was young. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she asked softly. "Loyalty." Amara felt something sharp twist inside her chest. Grace explained how communication slowly changed. Calls became shorter, messages delayed, promises postponed. Then one day, silence. "He stopped picking my calls," Grace said. "Stopped replying." She tried everything. Emails, messages, friends, nothing. "So when I finally saw him again," she said, looking straight at Daniel, "and he looked at me like a stranger, that broke me." Amara stood up abruptly. "You came back from the UK," she said to Daniel, her voice dangerously calm. "And you didn't look for her?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "I told myself she had moved on." Grace smiled sadly. "You didn't ask." Silence crashed into the room. "I didn't come here to expose him," Grace said, turning to Amara. "I just needed work. I needed to survive." She took a deep breath. "Seeing him here with a family, It reminded me that some people build their futures on sacrifices they pretend never existed. Amara felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked at Daniel. "This house," she said quietly, "is it built on lies too?" Daniel collapsed onto a chair. "I was ashamed," he confessed. "I didn't recognize myself anymore. I thought if I buried the past deep enough, it would stay there." Grace shook her head. "The past doesn't stay buried. It waits." Amara walked toward the window, staring out at the rain. Every memory replayed differently now. The stories Daniel told about struggling alone. The admiration she had for his resilience. The pride she felt in his success. All of it felt borrowed. She turned back slowly. "You didn't just betray her," Amara said. "You rewrote history to make yourself the hero." Daniel broke down completely. "I never meant for it to happen like this," he sobbed. Grace's voice softened. "But it did." That night no one slept. Grace packed quietly in her room, folding clothes neatly, as if tidiness could give her dignity back. Daniel sat in the living room, staring into nothing. Amara held her sleeping son, tears finally falling. She wondered how many women had loved men like Daniel, men who rose by stepping on someone else's faith. Grace stood at the door just before dawn. "I'll leave in the morning," she told Amara gently. "I don't want to disrupt your home." Amara looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "You didn't disrupt it," she said softly. "You revealed it." Grace nodded, and walked away. Morning came quietly, too quietly. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the air thick and damp, as if the night had cried itself dry. Sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, touching corners of the living room without warmth. Daniel hadn't moved. He sat on the same chair where he had collapsed the night before, elbows on his knees, head buried in his hands. The world around him continued as if nothing had happened, and that hurt more than chaos would have. Amara emerged from the bedroom carrying Ethan. The baby was awake, alert, oblivious to the fracture running through the house. He reached out toward his father, smiling, his tiny fingers opening and closing. Daniel looked up. Something in his face cracked completely. He stood and took Ethan into his arms, pressing the baby's head against his chest as if afraid the weight of his guilt might spill onto the child. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Amara watched from a distance. Some apologies arrived too late to land. Grace's room at the back of the house was empty, her mattress neatly made, her small box gone. The silence there felt intentional, like she had erased her presence carefully, leaving no excuse for pity. Amara walked back to the living room. "She left," she said simply. Daniel nodded. "She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to." They stood there, husband and wife, facing each other like strangers forced into the same photograph. "I don't know how to fix this," Daniel said finally. Amara looked at him steadily. "That's because some things aren't broken. They're exposed." Days passed slowly. Grace did not call. Daniel tried once, twice, then stopped. Each unanswered call felt like a deserved punishment. He began sending money anonymously through a mutual contact, telling himself it was responsibility, not guilt. Amara noticed everything. She noticed how Daniel avoided mirrors, how he flinched at compliments, how success no longer sat comfortably on his shoulders. One evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Amara spoke. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "If I had been Grace, would you have remembered me?" Daniel closed his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "And that scares me." Amara nodded slowly. "I didn't marry a monster," she said. "I married a man who chose ambition over accountability." She paused. "That's harder to forgive." Grace, meanwhile, returned to the life she had paused. She stayed briefly with a friend, then found work at a private school administrative staff. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dignified. Some nights she cried. Other nights, she slept peacefully for the first time in years. She refused to tell her story publicly, refused to become bitter, refused to be defined by sacrifice alone. She didn't ruin my life, she told herself. I allowed it. That realization hurt, but it also freed her. Back at the Okafor home, Amara began asking questions she had never allowed herself to ask before. What else don't I know? Who were you before me? Who did you step over to get here? Daniel answered everything. Painfully. Truth became their new language. Sometimes they spoke until dawn. Sometimes they sat in silence, holding Ethan between them like a fragile bridge. Amara did not leave. Not yet. But love had shifted from blind trust to cautious presence. One afternoon, Amara received a message from an unknown number. It was Grace. I just wanted to say thank you for not blaming me. Amara stared at the message for a long time before replying. You didn't know me, silence. You owed yourself truth. Grace replied with a simple heart. And that was all. Weeks later, Daniel attended a small gathering at work celebrating a new project. People praised his intelligence, his discipline, his rise. For the first time, the applause felt heavy. When someone said, "You're lucky, you made it on your own," Daniel corrected them. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." Amara, standing beside him, heard. It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it. That night, as they lay in bed, Amara stared at the ceiling. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Daniel turned toward her. "Every day. Not getting caught," she clarified. "Leaving her." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Because I lost myself long before I lost her." Amara reached for his hand. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But presence. Outside, Lagos continued its restless movement, traffic, ambition, survival. Inside that home, a new truth settled quietly. That love is not just about staying. It's about seeing clearly and deciding what you can live with. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is not walk away immediately, but stay long enough to understand the cost. Time did what it always does. It moved forward. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, forcing everyone to live with the choices they had already made. In the Okafor home, life settled into a new rhythm. Not the carefree one Amara once imagined, but something quieter, more deliberate. Daniel became more present. He came home earlier. He took Ethan on evening walks. He listened, really listened, when Amara spoke. But effort, Amara had learned, did not automatically rebuild trust. Trust had to be earned again. And even then, it returned differently. Grace, on the other hand, rebuilt her life far away from reminders. She enrolled in evening classes using her savings. She saved again, not for anyone else's dream this time, but for her own. Slowly, she rediscovered parts of herself she had buried beneath sacrifice. One afternoon, while organizing old documents, she found Daniel's old acceptance letter to the UK, the one she had once framed proudly. She stared at it for a long time. Then she tore it up. Not in anger, in release. Months later, fate crossed their paths one final time. It happened in a crowded supermarket. Grace pushed her cart, focused on her list, when she felt a presence beside her. "Grace," Daniel said softly. She looked up. He looked older. Not physically, internally. "I just wanted to say thank you," he continued. "And I'm sorry." Grace nodded. "I've forgiven you," he exhaled sharply. "But forgiveness," she added calmly, "doesn't mean access." Daniel smiled sadly. "I know." They parted without drama. Some stories end not with closure, but clarity. At home that night, Amara held her sleeping son and thought deeply about womanhood, sacrifice, and love. She realized something painful but necessary. Too many women were taught to give until empty, believing love would remember them. Too many men were taught that success excused erasure. She chose differently. Amara began speaking more, asking questions, setting boundaries, teaching Ethan slowly that character mattered more than applause. Daniel supported this change. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And that intention mattered. One evening, after Ethan fell asleep, Amara turned to Daniel. "If we ever lose everything, she said quietly. Promise me one thing. What? He asked. Promise me you won't forget who helped you stand. Daniel nodded, tears in his eyes. I promise. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became honest. And honesty, Amara learned, was the real foundation of any home. Some people don't just support your dreams. They sacrifice their own so you can rise. Success that forgets its foundations is incomplete. Love that benefits from sacrifice but refuses accountability is not love. If you are building a future, remember who paid the price. And if you are giving everything to someone's dream, make sure you are not disappearing inside it. Because the most painful betrayals are not always loud. Sometimes, they are simply remembered too late. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button and like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to tell us what you think of the story and where you are watching from. Bye for now.